Okay, good evening.
Everyone. Good evening. Hello, Rajat. Hello, Alessandro. Hello to our guests. Let me introduce to you the resuming of our podcast, Store of Bitcoin podcast, with me and Alessandro Ottaviani. The scope of the podcast is to bring about the store of value proposition of Bitcoin into the modern world. And to do this, we have today as a special guest Rajat Soni from Canada. Is a Bitcoin educator, CFA, passionate about finance and Bitcoin, of course. So I'll leave the word to him to introduce himself. And thank you, Rajat, to be with us today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I came across Bitcoin not too long ago. I've just been going down the rabbit hole nonstop. It's been life changing to say the least.
How long did you come across Bitcoin? How long ago? How many years?
So I started studying Bitcoin. I think it was in 2021.
Hmm.
I was first introduced to it in like early, but I just thought it was too complicated. Thought it was gonna be something I can't wrap my head around. I think I first started hearing about it in 2010. I ignored it, of course. And then 2013, ignored it again. Then 2017, ignored it again. 2020 is finally when one of my coworkers actually mentioned it to me, and I started really looking into it because uh, it just felt like something was off. I don't know. I don't know what it was, but that was when the lockdowns happened. That's when government started printing tons of money and throwing it into the economy, and something felt off. And just coincidentally, somebody mentioned the book on their social media, the Bitcoin Standard, and I listened to it. And after that, I was hooked. Non like the, I think every single day I probably spend at least 2-3 hours listening to podcasts, trying to learn more about this thing, where it's going. Back then I was spending like 7-8 hours. At one point I was actually doing Uber Eats. I was delivering food for Uber, and I was listening to podcasts while I was driving around, which was awesome because to me it felt like I was being paid to learn, and it worked really well for me because I was sitting in my car the whole time. I was just absorbing as much content as possible. Um, and yeah, I think it takes a lot of time to get to this point. I feel like I've put that point in. I put that time in. And I feel like I've earned the knowledge that I have.
It's interesting you were hooked immediately by it because you come from a traditional background of education into finance. You are CFA, so now you are from a regulated body entity. I look at your post, you know what happened. So uh, maybe there was something inside of you which you didn't really trust the Keynesian economics since the beginning, or was something which during your study path about Austrian economics which brought bounced back to you, or you didn't knew anything about it, maybe about Austrian economics, it was just you? What do you think how that happened?
Oh, it took me a long time. I had to, because I was working on a bond desk where we're constantly surrounded by yield. We're surrounded by people buying bonds, getting a 1 to 2% return, expecting that. Okay, so the desk that I worked at, I worked as a fixed income analyst. We would help these massive institutions rebalance their portfolios. Let's say, for example, there's an insurance company who needs to make a payout. What we would do is basically we would sell some of their bonds, the ones that are going to mature, the most recent, or the ones that are either they're selling at a premium. We would sell them, and then we would give them the cash, and they can now offer that cash to their clients for the settlements that they have to the payouts that they have to make. So I was surrounded by yield for a very long time. So I didn't even I didn't get it until I don't think I completely got it until the end of 2023. So I started studying in around 2020, 2021. But what I mean by get it is 100%. Like everything that I save goes into Bitcoin. I sold all my stocks and bought Bitcoin. I didn't buy any rental properties. Before that, I was still questioning it. I was still thinking like, oh, you might as well use Bitcoin to diversify, right? You have a portfolio of assets. You have stocks, real estate, bonds. Bitcoin is just a part of it. So at that point, before I really got it, before it clicked, to me, it was more like, this is just another asset. After it clicked, it was like this is the only asset, right? And that, like,
Yes.
once you get over that hump, that's probably the hardest part to get your mind out of, thinking that Bitcoin is just another asset. I actually have podcasts where I was saying how, oh no, Bitcoin doesn't compete with real estate, Bitcoin doesn't compete with stocks. I've actually said that before. I just thought, oh, you should have a 10, 15, 20% allocation, whatever you have. um, you should still have these other assets. But now I'm thinking, no, there's no point. Why would you want to own stocks when you have more risk? You have an executive team that's making decisions for you. You have companies making products, and these products can fail. There's research and development going into them. So you're putting your money into something that can fail with a stock, and you have all this human aspect of things. You have this emotions, all these things that go into owning a stock. They're all risks, right? There's an executive team, there's a CEO, there's people making decisions, there's salespeople, there's customers. Customers, for all you know, your product may fall out of favor with your customers at some point, right? If you're investing in this company, like let's say we all buy Apple stock. What if there's a better phone that comes out? Somebody disrupts Apple, and now Apple is no longer the best phone out there. I mean, it's already happening. I think Androids are much better than Apple. If people want to discuss this, they can.
It's
But
a big topic separately. Yes.
massive. That's what I mean, right? The thing is that there are competitors for Apple. There's competitors for Samsung. There's competitors for all these other things. Whatever your beliefs are, you buy whatever phone you want. I'm not against anything. But what I'm trying to say here is that there's no competitor for Bitcoin. Nobody can compete
Yes.
with Bitcoin. There's no way for anybody to compete. Nobody can. Even governments, they're scared of Bitcoin because their currency doesn't compete. So getting that in my mind was probably the hardest part. Just understanding that there's no competition to this thing. Nobody can compete with it. Nobody can stop it. Nobody can control it. Once you get that, I think it's very difficult not to go all in.
It's also kind of almost impossible to unlearn Bitcoin. Once you learn,
Yes.
as I saw one of your posts saying, I saw people selling real estate for Bitcoin. But once you understood Bitcoin, then you don't sell Bitcoin as let's specify as an investment vehicle and not for goods
Yeah.
and services, because maybe that's also the reason why we have money. But as an investment vehicle, you don't sell Bitcoin for real estate or for stocks. I will not see myself at all to invest on
Yeah.
this.
Yeah, you still need to buy houses. Like, you still need a house to
Yes.
live in. But the thing is that you don't need more houses than you need to live in, right? You shouldn't be buying more
Yeah.
houses. You don't if you don't need 10 houses, then why would you buy them? You buy what you want to consume, and then you put the rest of it into Bitcoin. And then what that does is it gives you optionality for the future. So instead of having your money tied up in a house, you can hold Bitcoin, sell some Bitcoin whenever you want to, and that's your cash flow. Let's say, for example, you have 10 Bitcoin, you have $1,000 worth of expenses. You sell $1,000 worth of Bitcoin, you keep the rest, right?
Yes.
You don't need to earn cash flows. First of all, you don't need to lend your Bitcoin to someone else. You don't need yield. People are, for some reason, people are under this impression that, oh, if I own this asset, I want to own it forever. I'm never giving it away. But it doesn't work that way,
Yes.
right? The real world doesn't work that way. The current financial system, I like to call it the legacy financial system. The current financial system is built the way it is because it allows people to delay gratification and get
Okay.
instant gratification at the same time, right? Because what you can do is you can own a house, you can benefit from its appreciation over the next 10, 20, 30, 50 years, but at the same time, you can go to your bank and you can tell them, hey, give me some money. I have this asset, I'm never going to sell it. Give me some money and I'll borrow that money from you and I'll pay you interest. And they can just create it out of thin air. You can't do that with Bitcoin. It changes everything.
Everything.
The entire playbook is irrelevant now. Like, people thought, oh, buying real estate was the way to go. No, no way. You can't do that anymore. If you keep doing that, you're gonna lose.
Yes, it's very clear to me that buying real estate is encouraging, taking a mortgage is encouraged by the banks because that's how they make money. They make the interest from there. So, but the reality is that they can just stay on rent and invest the same amount of the rent into Bitcoin. So they
Yes.
can, at the end after 20 years, they can still buy the house by selling the Bitcoin for
Selling a
retirement,
portion of
a
Bitcoin
portion.
instead of, yes.
Yeah,
In
yeah.
fact,
So
also, as Rajat said, I think also sometimes we, as Bitcoiners, we are like too much max in saying we will never sell. That's not true. There will be we are not selling now. We are not selling at 200K. We are not selling at maybe at 300K, 400K. But at one point, you will have enough Bitcoin that you may use. Maybe you keep stacking a bit, but then you say, okay, makes sense to sell a portion to use to buy goods and services. Because at the end, buying Bitcoin, we also sacrifice the present because we don't spend this money. And to have a better future. So this better future should come. Otherwise, which is the point?
That's exactly the way that I see it. Is, to me, Bitcoin is just a savings account. If I ever need to, let's say, for example, I have a certain amount of Bitcoin, and I need to pay for a vacation, and I don't have enough fiat currency coming in over the next year. I have to sell some of my Bitcoin. I can't avoid that, right? Bitcoin is just, to me, a savings account where if I have extra fiat currencies, I'm going to convert it into Bitcoin. I'm going to save in Bitcoin. If I have extra Bitcoin, or if I need more fiat currencies, if I have extra Bitcoin, then I'm going to have to sell some of my Bitcoin to sustain my lifestyle. That's the point. The point of Bitcoin is to give you a savings account that you have freedom with, right? You can sell it whenever you want to. You can hold on to it for as long as you want. You can give it away if you want. You can do whatever you want with it. And that's the point. In the legacy system, of course, you have to hold on to your assets forever. And governments give you an incentive to hold on to your assets because, let's say, for example, they charge you capital gains tax if you sell. But if you borrow against your assets, then you have no taxes. And that's part of the broken system, right? That's part of the system that created so many problems for so many people. It's created so many issues that, I guess, separate the wealthy from the poor. And that's, if you want to continue that, then keep buying legacy assets. But Bitcoin is coming for every single dollar of monetary value in the legacy system. It's coming for every single dollar of monetary premium. And all of that is going to be absorbed by Bitcoin. People think Bitcoin is expensive at 100K. It's going to 1 million. It's going to 10 million. It's going to 100 million. Nobody can stop it.
I was having exactly a conversation with other people, and I always find it fun and hilarious. 2 years ago, it was 16K, 20K. Then it went maybe to 25. And people say, "Oh, it looks expensive. Let's wait for 20K." Then it went to 50. It looks expensive, and it went to 45. Then 80K. I wait, too expensive. So for some people, it will go to 1 million, but they will never buy because it's always looking expensive. At least when you buy the first time, because you don't know that much. Also, Max Kaiser was saying that he bought at $1. He was so smart to buy $1, but for him also, when he bought, it was feeling expensive because he had a friend who bought at 30 cents. So if you continue like this, at one point people will get it. If it's going up, then it's going up, and you should not recriminate because other people bought in the past. Look at how many people didn't buy it yet, so you're still ahead of so many other people.
I would focus more on the risks of the two assets. No, let's say people you mentioned, you said before that maybe it's true for the biggest part of the world, like in the US, Canada, that real estate always appreciates. But on a single house, that cannot be true. For instance, can be that in that area goes run down or dodgy, and then nobody's going to buy anymore, so you lose value, and then. You still have a mortgage which you can default on the mortgage for some reason, and that is really the end of the world financially for you because you go on auction sale and then just you're still in debt even without the house. So there are big risks in real estate, and those risks are not, of course, highlighted by the banks or the institution who lend you money because they want you to lend you money. But as opposed, we have the Bitcoin, which is a global asset. So you don't suffer from the peculiarity of the area you are buying your real estate house in, and also you don't have other risks like the scarcity because real estate can be BlackRock was doing before. I don't know if it's still doing. There are memes circulating, and that they're buying borogs and borogs, and they set the price of the rent because they own all of it, you know. So these dynamics can still happen in real estate. You have no control on it, as opposed to Bitcoin, where you have a mathematical halving the scarcity, something protects you over time. So that there are less risks, in my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah, and nobody can increase the supply. Nobody can change the supply. Like, on the other hand, with real estate, if we have the resources to build more houses, we can. And those resources are going to become more and more abundant until we use them to build houses, right? Like, for example, over time, it gets easier and easier to make houses. It gets easier and easier because we have, like right now, for example, 3D printed houses. They're not the nicest. They don't look that great. They take some time to build. I think they cost like half of what it would cost for a regular house. But over time, that's going to decrease, right? As more companies produce 3D printers to build houses, the cost of building a house is going to decrease. As more companies are willing to create prefabricated homes, people are going to be building walls in factories, and then they're going to be delivering it to your land, right? It's going to take you, instead of 6 months to build a house, it's going to take you 2 days. It might still cost you the same amount. Like right now, it might cost you the same amount, but eventually the cost will decrease. But what it's doing is it's basically decreasing the time required to build houses. On the other hand, with Bitcoin, it takes more and more time to create the same amount of Bitcoin. So if you want to create 1 Bitcoin, let's say in 2009, if you want to create 1 Bitcoin, it would only cost you 12 seconds of your time. Sorry, what was it? 12 seconds of your time? It was 50 Bitcoin every 10 minutes. Yeah, so 12 seconds of your time. It costs you 12 seconds to build 1 Bitcoin, to create 1 Bitcoin. Today, it takes 3 minutes, 3.125 Bitcoin for every 10 minutes. So it takes, almost 3 minutes to make a Bitcoin? So it's gone from 12 seconds to build 1 Bitcoin, to create 1 Bitcoin, to taking 3 minutes. It's increased by, what is that? Like 30 times?
Yeah.
Something like that. Right, so the resources required to make Bitcoin are increasing. On the other hand, the resources required to make housing are decreasing because it takes less and less time to build a house. We get better at making houses, so more houses can enter the market. So why would people be willing to pay more for houses, right? In terms of fiat currencies, of course, house prices are always going to go up because fiat currencies are easier to create than houses, right? On the other hand, in terms of Bitcoin, the price of a house is always going to go down because Bitcoin is much harder to create than houses. So it's just, you're flipping the script. You're completely changing how things work.
Probably when we stop, firstly, if we print less, but not only printing less, but also now the general thinking that a good way to invest is real estate. When this will stop, then the value of the house will go to the utility value, so the value of living in that house, and maybe will decrease year over year because of what you said, because we advance as technology, so it will cost less, and it will be taking less time. But so far, it's an investment vehicle. They print money. This money, where it goes, one channel is real estate.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think over time it's going to become cheaper and cheaper to build houses. It's going to become easier and easier to build houses, and there's no way to avoid that.
Yeah. And another thing that I find also from many people talking about real estate, they say, okay, they could just compare the rent versus the loan. And for me, it's only a part of the conversion, the comparison you should do. Because with the rent, maybe if it is warm, you have everything there. With the loan, you have ancillary costs, so the notary, the agency, you have taxes, you have maintenance costs. Then, and also you have a tendency, firstly, maintenance cost, and maybe at the beginning you have also to make some work, plus the down payment. People don't consider this opportunity cost that you put in the house that could have been gone to Bitcoin, and Bitcoin can appreciate 500%. So maybe it would be way better you keep renting while your all the money that you should have spent for the loan you put in Bitcoin and appreciate. And then, as Francesco said, at one point we will buy a house, but not taking such a big loan.
Yeah, why not? Right? I mean, if at some point your Bitcoin is worth
with
$10
Bitcoin,
million,
yes, the loan with Bitcoin, yes, it's different.
Yeah, I mean, if your Bitcoin is worth $10 million at one point and you need a house to live in, why wouldn't you go for it, right? It's a lifestyle improvement, and you can afford it. So why wouldn't you? At some point, Bitcoiners are going to be willing to exchange their Bitcoin. At some point, Bitcoiners are going to be willing to give away 1,000,000 satoshis for a house, right?
It
Like
depends also from when I bought, and also value is subjective. For
yeah,
some people also could have bought at the same time, at the same time of Bitcoin, but they can have two different reasoning. Some will be a bit earlier, a bit later. But
yeah,
most of us, as me, similar to you, I started in 2017, 18. I heard and I invested a bit, but I didn't know anything, just another asset. I start to
yeah,
learn the 2021. So the first real big wave of Bitcoiners is this in this cycle. In the last cycle, it means that you should have been there in 2016, 17. And that was much harder because also the material available, Bitcoin Standard, the Sailor, Breedlove, Antonopoulos, they were not so popular. So
yeah.
this is the first real wave, big wave of Bitcoiners. Also, we can see in podcasts, as we are doing now, your important podcast as well.
Absolutely. And I mean, over time, it just becomes it's like everything else, right? It becomes the information becomes more abundant, but the
Yeah.
Bitcoin becomes more scarce. That's the Bitcoin is the only thing that nobody can make more abundant. Nobody can increase the supply of Bitcoin, meaning that the people who own it are going to be paid in terms of dollars or in terms of really everything else to give their Bitcoin away, right? And we can see from the trends that it becomes harder and harder to bring Bitcoin's price down. I don't think we're ever going to see the 50K level again, right?
Same.
And because of that, because there's no more sellers, I like to say this. There's one phrase that I like to say: Bitcoin will run out at every single price. It's because the people who own Bitcoin, they're not going to be willing to sell. Like right now, we're never going to be able to go back to a $1 Bitcoin,
Yeah.
because why would somebody want to sell their Bitcoin for $1? Would you sell your Bitcoin for $1?
No way.
Right? I wouldn't sell my Bitcoin for $1. Maybe there's some crazy person out there who's willing to sell their Bitcoin for $1, but it'll be snapped up
It's a drop.
as quickly as
A drop
possible
in
in like
the yes.
milliseconds. People will take it, right?
Yeah.
If there's an offer for a $1 Bitcoin, why wouldn't you take it, right? But over time, the number of people who are crazy enough to sell their Bitcoin for $1, then the number of people who are willing to sell their Bitcoin for $10, then the number of people who are selling it for $100, $1,000, $10,000. I actually think we're never going to go back to the once we pass 100K confidently. Like right now, there's of course a lot of shakiness.
Yeah.
There's not too much confidence. I guess people
It takes
aren't
some
as
time.
confident in $100,000 Bitcoin as I expected them to be. But I think once that barrier is broken, we're never going back to 5-figure Bitcoin.
See? And with that, likely, what I'm saying, if someone is not in Bitcoin, not an entrepreneur, and not really in upper class, if he starts now, likely will never be able to buy one full Bitcoin. If he
Yeah,
starts now, from the moment you start, as you said, with 1%, 2%, 5%, if it really goes up, then the opportunity to be a whole coiner will be gone forever.
yeah, it's true. It's true. It becomes harder and harder to accumulate. Like if you think about it, like 15 years ago, you could buy 10,000 Bitcoin
Yes.
for $1.
Yes.
Right? What you could do that before, or not, maybe not that much, but whatever the number was, maybe 100 Bitcoin for $1. But Bitcoin, because Bitcoin has a finite supply, the number of people who are willing to sell their Bitcoin for those prices will always, always, always run out. Like right now, we can't find people who are willing to sell for $60,000 because they know that it's probably worth more. And over time, that floor just keeps increasing and increasing until Bitcoin's price is like way too high for the majority of people to afford. Most people will not be buying Bitcoin. They're going to be working for it.
Okay.
When do you think will it happen in a timeline?
Um,
It's we know that it's high
I
level
Mm.
estimation.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
only
yeah,
estimation is. We will. I also say we will know next decade. But
yeah.
if you
I think it really depends on how. Honestly, most people they're not smart enough to understand it. They're not willing to put in the time. Actually, I shouldn't say they're not smart enough to understand it. I think they're not willing to put in the time to
yeah, correct.
understand it. Right. And I think what's going to happen is most people aren't going to be doing it willingly. They're going to be forced into it. Like they're uh they're gonna download a wallet of Satoshi or some kind of liquid or Lightning wallet, and their employer is going to be paying them directly to that wallet. And they're not going to know that there's Bitcoin related. They're just going to see, oh, I have this thing, it's worth this many dollars. Oh, over time, the amount of dollars that I keep having keeps increasing, so I'm going to spend my this whatever this thing is. Most people probably won't even touch the base layer of Bitcoin because it's going to get way too expensive for them,
Yes.
right? And I think that's what really separates people who are early versus the people who are late. The earlier you are, the more Bitcoin you'll be able to get. The later you are, the less Bitcoin you'll get. Like, for example, today, maybe somebody can still buy 1 Bitcoin. At some point, people are going to be competing for 0.1 Bitcoin, then 0.01 Bitcoin, right? The available Bitcoin keeps decreasing because people don't want dollars. They don't want pieces of paper. Even Americans don't want dollars. They're willing to give away their dollars to buy houses because they know that those dollars are going to decrease in value over time. So people have already figured it out. It's just that I think they can't wrap their head around the fact that this thing can be digital. It doesn't have any physical characteristics. You can't hold it, you can't touch it, you can't do anything with that. And I think most people are just, their minds are blown because they can't get to that level of thinking yet.
Yes, yeah, very very accurate said. I think also one of the problem is everything people they say, but Bitcoin doesn't have any other utility apart of being money. And actually, is a strong point for Bitcoin if you if you studied money. But
It's a good
if
thing, yeah.
someone didn't study money, they think, okay, gold. There's also some utilities in industrial or for ornament. Also, cigarettes, whatever. Most of the other assets they had also other utility, and they don't see Bitcoin consequent to that. Then they say no. But in reality, the less you have other utility versus being money, the more there is the strong position to be money.
Yeah.
It's new thing, new technology is the first asset that has been engineered and created to be money. All the other money that we had, I don't consider so dollar or euro are a good currency, but they are not real money. So we don't solve
Yeah.
the value. So all the
Yeah,
other,
I like to say that fiat currencies are fake money.
and for me, I call it it's more currency than money.
Yeah.
They don't have store of value proposition. Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Also, one of the problems is that for retail people, they should question all of what was built before by the banks, by the institution, all of the narrative based on fiat money. So there is some fear to go against it, to go to explore it, because it's given for granted. And it will be interesting to see, because Bitcoin is expanding. There's no question. It's growing bigger and bigger. And then it's already attacking and penetrating institutions and getting into it, but and they have to sell it, no, like they're doing. But then this thing will grow. So how the institution will balance the need to sell with the need of the people not to be scared or to find out the truth, or worse, to find out the truth. So it would be interesting to see how it plays out, because I mean, this it's not compatible. That's the Austrian economics and the Keynesian economics. So the two things can never match, in my opinion. So will be interesting to see how they sell it. But I think also one of the reasons is that the people they don't want to question what is already what their whole life is built upon. And to this point, I will say, given that you, as a CFA, you can talk with the other colleagues of yours. How do they see it? Skilled people who are knowledgeable about economics, how do they see it?
I'm not sure if the audience here knows about what happened with my story. I actually got investigated by the CFA Institute for posting about Bitcoin. So, I mean, it's
You
clear that they
already
don't like it.
said a lot already.
Yeah, they don't like it. So, I mean, that just says a lot on its own, right? But I don't think most people are going to get it for a while. I actually think that most people are going to ignore Bitcoin until it reaches $1 million. I think most people aren't going to touch it. They're not going to. They're going to keep thinking it's a joke. It's going to
Yeah.
go to $1 million. They're going to finally start figuring it out, and then they're going to get crashed on. The price is going to. They're going to figure it out at $1 million. It's going to go down to like 600,000. They're going to go, oh, it's a scam, right? And then they're
And
going to
then we
sell
say
it.
we bought at 20K. For me, it's what is the problem?
Yeah,
For us,
right.
yes.
Yeah, but like to them, it's like, oh, it's a scam. I bought it at $1 million. Now it's at 600,000. It's going to go to zero, and they're going to start selling it, and then it's going to go back up. It's going to go to $10 million, and they're going to be like, oh, I missed out. This is a scam. It's going to keep happening, right? But then that's how adoption happens. That's
Yeah.
how the people who don't understand it. I think that phrase, you buy Bitcoin at the price you deserve, I think that only applies to when you first get introduced to Bitcoin and then you start studying it. The comparison between the price when you first got introduced to it versus when you start studying it and you finally start buying it, that's what I mean by you buy Bitcoin at the price you deserve. So for me, for example, I was introduced to it in 2010, 2009, and I ignored it. It was free back then. I could think about how many Bitcoin I could have had, right? I wouldn't need to work a job, right? But the thing is that I ignored it. I didn't deserve Bitcoin at the time because I hadn't put in the time. If I had bought Bitcoin at that point, I probably wouldn't have valued it as much. I wouldn't understand how money works. I would have no background into Keynesian economics, Austrian economics, all this stuff. I would have no background. I probably wouldn't have read the Bitcoin Standard. So if I had studied Bitcoin at that time, I would have given it away. Right? I wouldn't have built this foundation of understanding how money works. I would have given it away to consume whatever I wanted to. And if I had adopted Bitcoin in 2010, I would probably be worse off than I am today, because what I would have done is, let's say I bought 1,000 Bitcoin at 20 cents each. I would have sold it when it went to 35 cents. Great trade, but I would have missed out on 100K, right?
Yeah.
I think that's what a lot of people are doing.
At that time, to have the strong conviction to put your savings into Bitcoin would be even harder, because it was really more at risk to be killed, to be banned, or to have something. Now it's too big to fail as well, like when it was at the time. So,
and if I had kept my Bitcoin at the time, if I had bought Bitcoin and kept it, I would have probably put it on Mount Gox, because I was never a technical guy. I was never very technical, right? I would have lost my Bitcoin at some point. So to me, it would have been even worse, because I would have thought, oh, this thing is a scam. I'm never buying it. And I would just watched it go to 100,000, 200,000, 500,000, $1 million, and I would never have gotten exposure to it. But because I waited, I bought Bitcoin at the price I deserved because I studied it. Now I have this conviction that is never going to go away. Like this, when you borrow conviction from someone else, when you don't do the research for yourself, you're always going to feel stupid, because you're always going to think, oh, it's going to crash here, it's going to crash here, when you don't really understand what it is. You're always going to sell early. You're going to buy late. You're going to make dumb decisions. You're going to give away your Bitcoin for whatever reason. You're never going to really understand what you hold. But when you actually do the studying, you put in the time, you put in the effort to understand it yourself, it's a game changer.
Yes, I agree. Also, X in this way, it helps, especially during the bear market, because I think around us, in many cases, we don't have so many people they think as strong as at us. So maybe this could also think, okay, maybe it could be me that I'm wrong. But then you see also in X that many people who have different background, technology, economics, or other politics, or many other, and then they came up with the same conclusion. So this also reinforced the message. If there is not anything behind, it could not be that so many people are now coming with the same conclusion. I also never seen someone who is saying go 100% in Tesla, or go 100% in Nvidia, or go with one stock. Now Bitcoiners are, for sure, it's not a financial advice, but they say I have most of my savings in Bitcoin, so there should be something behind.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's really important to consider. You can't invest 100% of your income or 100% of your savings into a company like Nvidia, because you don't know what's happening in the background.
Yes.
Right? For all you know, maybe I'm not saying that they're doing this, but for all you know, maybe the CEO is taking money out, right? For all you know, maybe they're screwing over their shareholders in some way. You can't confirm that unless you're part of the insiders. The insiders know a lot more than the outsiders. There's that information asymmetry. With Bitcoin, there is no information asymmetry. You know for a fact that there's only 21 million Bitcoin. Just buy Bitcoin and wait. That's it. You don't have to do anything else. You can't buy Nvidia stock and wait, because Nvidia's business plan could completely change in the time that you're waiting. It could become a completely different company. Like Apple, for example, when it was a 30-cent stock, was a completely different company from Apple today. Tesla, when it was a $12 stock, was a completely different company than what it is today, right? So you can't just buy certain stocks and wait. You can buy index funds and wait, but again, you're going to massively underperform against Bitcoin. Why would you want to do that, right? You're taking a lot less risk by owning Bitcoin. At least once you understand how Bitcoin works, you're taking a lot less risk by owning Bitcoin than you are with index funds or with individual stocks.
Maybe we should also connect less risk with a holding period of 4 years.
Oh yeah,
Because in the short term, it's risky, it's volatile, then people can take the risk. But if you want to trade or to have a holding period less than 4 years, then I also agree it's risky. It's your risk. You can underperform or you can lose money. The
yeah.
less risk it comes if it is a long-term investment.
It's true. I agree with you. That's a great point to add in there. It's so important to have that 4-year time horizon, because over 4-year periods, Bitcoin's price is going to go up. So when Bitcoin's price dropped to 15K, a lot of people were saying, "Oh, somebody bought at 69K, 70K, and they're now at a loss." They bought in 2021, and they've just held on to this asset, and now they lost 75%. But if you waited another year, you made back your money, and then you waited another year, now you're up 50%. And all you have to do is wait. That's it.
Exactly. It's not also it's simple, maybe not easy. It's a basic rule. Whatever you put, if you consider as an investment, then it should be like if you buy now, regardless of the price, till January 2029, you should not sell, regardless of the volatility. It's simple,
Yeah.
but it looks like it's not easy because many people go panic and, and then they say Bitcoin is a scam or I got wrecked. No, you didn't follow the rules.
That's exactly it. You have to follow the rules. If you're going to get exposure to this asset, you need to follow the rules. If you're not going to follow the rules, you're going to get screwed. No matter what happens. If, let's say, for example, if you're setting up your wallet and you take a picture of your private keys, your seed phrase, you're going to get screwed because you didn't follow the rules. You don't share your seed phrase with anybody. You don't put it on the internet. You don't put it on your cell phone. You keep it offline. If you don't follow those rules, don't blame anybody else for stealing your Bitcoin. You made it available to them. You gave it to them, basically, right?
True.
Yeah. Yeah. So it just came to my mind how the integration of Bitcoin to the retail people and with the institution is going to happen, because it's true. We also believe it until it doesn't go to $1 million and it becomes more evident, like they are pushing for it. Banks, institutions are pushing. They say buy, buy, buy because they will benefit, make money on it. Then they will change the narrative. And then it came to my mind how the narrative changes happens. Once I saw a video about the politicians, how do they change the narrative? Basically, they run the surveys 1, 2, 3 times, and after the survey is confirmed, they just say what the people want to hear. So, and from now until Bitcoin gets to $1 million, there will be time for them to put the scholars, the educators, the financial gurus. They're saying that maybe we have to buy some, and then slowly it will sink in, and they will justify the narrative shift. But over the next 5, 6, 7 years period, then the mocking they made on us, on people, or the head of the bank summoning you because you buy Bitcoin, all these things will be forgotten because enough time will be passed. So time is what will bring the retail into the institution, and it will also legitimize the selling of the asset. That's what I think.
Yeah,
Okay.
completely agree. Yeah, over time, that's it, right? Over time, people are going to figure it out. Over time, people forget that it dropped. Like if somebody bought Bitcoin at 60K, do you think they're still going to be complaining, "Oh, it dropped to 15K"? No, they're not. They're going to be saying that they bought Bitcoin at 60K and now it's worth 100K. They're up 66%, and they've outperformed every other investment that they've ever had. That's what they're going to talk about. They're not going to talk about, "Oh, on the way to this point, Bitcoin dropped 70%, so I hate it. I'm not going to buy any more of it." You'd be stupid to think that way.
Yes, yes,
Totally.
yes, yes. And in this path of Bitcoin is cementing itself as a store of value, you know. When do you think it actually started? Do you think that Saylor is the only one responsible of it, or was starting before with minor players? I mean, minor, less known. And how do you see the store of value feature of Bitcoin growing in the next 2, 3, 4 years? Are the insurance going to buy some other? How is going to play out?
Well, the way that I see it, every single person who owns Bitcoin is a part of it, right? Every single person who owns Bitcoin and they're not spending it. If you're just holding your Bitcoin, you're using it as a store of value. Whether it goes down or it goes up, you're still using it as a store of
Yeah.
value. Whether you go based on that 4-year rule or not, you're still using it as a store of value. All you're doing is you're holding onto this asset, you're holding onto the access to this asset, and you're waiting for a time to spend it in the future. That's it, right? That's what a store of value is. All that a store of value is a way for you to transfer value to your future self. So Bitcoin is doing that perfectly. I think that started in 2009, right? If you look at if you look at the first addresses that received Bitcoin as block rewards, the block number 1, actually, let me open that up here. But if you look at the first the first transactions that happened, if we go to block number 1, let me open up my screen. If you look at block number 1, you can see that the Bitcoin is still there. So the Bitcoin that was generated in this first block, you go to this address, it's still there. So whoever mined this block used it as a store of value. They're still using it as a store of value. Whether it's lost or not, the private keys are lost. Nobody can tell you because nobody knows who owns this Bitcoin. Maybe it's Satoshi, whoever that person is. But this Bitcoin is being used as a store of value. And as more Bitcoin is being used as a store of value, what it does is it takes supply out of the market and it increases the price. So this Bitcoin, somebody could easily sell this 50 Bitcoin and make $4.83 million. But they're not, because for whatever reason, they don't have access to it,
Maybe don't
either
have
they're
the keys
saving
anymore.
it for the future, right? But who knows? Maybe at some point it'll be used. But the store of value function, from my understanding, even though maybe people didn't have that intention of keeping this Bitcoin for this long, they still have it and they're using it as a store of value. So Bitcoin is either being used as a store of value or a medium of exchange. If you transfer your Bitcoin to someone else and they just hold on to it, then they're using it as a store of value. At every point in time, Bitcoin is being used as a store of value by someone. The people who hold on to Bitcoin, they're expecting that the value will go up over time. So in this case, whoever this wallet belonged to, they're still using it as a store of value. Who knows if it'll ever be sold? Maybe it won't. But until it's sold, it's still being used as a store of value until it's moved from this address to another address.
Right. Thanks for showing that as well.
Nice,
Another,
nice you showed the first.
I didn't know about it. Yes.
It wasn't prepared. Okay.
Another point, also back to the topic of education, what I find interesting is the level. One of big obstacle will be the ego of people, of admitting to being wrong. And for me, I see two different two different group, not kind of people. Some, they say, okay, don't trust it, but they know that they don't know, so they don't trust. And I think for them will be much easier to understand Bitcoin or to be involved than the other group who is saying, no, Bitcoin consumes too much energy, Bitcoin has no intrinsic value, Bitcoin is not backed by anything, or Bitcoin is used only by criminals. And the more they are exposed publicly or with other people, with colleagues or in X or in LinkedIn and so on, the harder will be to admit to have been wrong. And that's why also to all the people that they are saying this, I always say, you should study it before having an educated opinion. Don't do the mistake that you have this opinion, think that is true, because then it will be hard. And also I say, unfortunately for all the Bitcoin skeptics, it's not a compromise. We say something, they say something else, and we meet in the middle. No, it will happen that we were right and they were wrong. And admitting to have been wrong, it's a hard topic. So at the end, it's their own fault that they keep saying things without knowing that they don't know. What do you think?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. It's people have these preconceived notions about how finance should work,
Yeah.
but usually they're wrong, right? People just think, oh, you need to have cash flows. You need to have a physical asset to be represented by money needs to be physical. It needs to be represented by this physical commodity, or a government needs to issue money. But it doesn't work that way. The way that it works, and Bitcoin is proving it, the way that it works is the form of money that we use is just the thing that's most widely accepted as money. It doesn't matter who issues it. It doesn't matter if it's issued by a government. It doesn't matter if it's issued by some random company. It doesn't matter if it came out of the ground. If it only exists on the internet. It doesn't matter if it's in the sky. It doesn't really matter. All that matters is that the money that we have has certain characteristics, and if it doesn't have those characteristics, then it doesn't work as money. Those are the things that really should matter, but people don't see it that way. People see it as, oh, a government needs to issue the money, or uh, governments need to be able to create more of it to control the economy. But no, that's not how it works. That's not the purpose of money. I think it's really important to look at the first principles, the root of everything, when people are actually looking at the symptoms, right? So for example, people tell you, oh, Bitcoin is going to fail. Bitcoin can't compete with real estate because we need places to live in. We're going to need places to live in regardless. We needed places to live in before the US dollar existed. We needed places to live in before people started monetizing housing and started using it as a store of value. We still needed places to live in, but now we have an alternative. Before Bitcoin, there was no alternative. Maybe there was the alternative with gold, but how many people want to hold thousands of ounces of gold in their house?
I know.
There's
Not twice.
no matter what happens, you're going to have to rely on some kind of custodian. You're going to have to pay security. You're going to, if you want to, there's this thought experiment that I like doing. If the world goes to a gold standard, how are we going to pay for things? What is it going to look like? Okay, so you go to a coffee shop. You're going to pay them with a certain amount of gold. They're going to send it to their goldsmith. Right, they're gonna send it to their goldsmith. Their goldsmith's gonna get back to them in 3 to 5 business days. Oh, you can have your coffee in 3 to 5 business days, right?
We go
doesn't
back.
work that way,
Yes.
right? It doesn't work that way. We're trying to make our transactions faster and faster, and that's what Bitcoin does. On a fiat currency standard, the only reason why fiat works over Bitcoin or over gold is because it's much faster to transact.
Yeah.
It's much more divisible, much easier to move from place to place. But there's never a perfect solution. There's only trade-offs. This is a quote that I heard from somebody. There's never a perfect solution. There's only trade-offs. You can either use fiat currencies and hold on to this thing that's not scarce, that can be created out of thin air, and you can have the ease of transactions, or you can hold on to gold. At least that was the case before Bitcoin. You could hold on to gold, which is hard to create. You can't print it. You can't issue more of it out of thin air. But with gold, you can't transact with it. It's very difficult to verify, very difficult to move around, very difficult to divide into smaller and smaller units. Whereas with Bitcoin, you have both. Bitcoin basically combines fiat and gold. It takes all of their best characteristics and it puts it all together. Whereas most people are just stuck in this perspective that fiat currencies are the only way to go. So they don't see the negatives of fiat. They don't see the negatives. They don't see how fiat currencies are actually destroying the world. So that's where the ego comes in. They have these beliefs. They think that fiat currencies are the way to go. They think that fiat currencies are the only thing that we should be using as money. And because of this, they completely just dismiss Bitcoin.
Till maybe 1 million or maybe 500.
Even at $1 million, there's still going to be people saying, "Oh, it's a pyramid scheme. It's a Ponzi scheme. It's going to zero. It's still worthless. Oh, it's just going up because of hype. It's going up because." No, go ahead.
For this, I'm skeptical on this. I see 1 million as okay. Then everyone should admit, at least 90+% should admit, because if they studied a bit economics, gold was the number one asset for 5,000 years. It's not every 10 years that we have one most valuable asset in the world. And with 1 million, or let's say 1.1, depends on which it will be the price of gold, Bitcoin will be higher. let's say the moment when Bitcoin is going higher, after 5,000 years, we have one asset that becomes the most valuable asset. I find it difficult to believe that still at that level, people will think that is a Ponzi scheme.
But
It could be,
Alessandro, see, the thing is that you're going based on logic.
yes.
That's not what people do. Most
That's
people.
a problem.
I did a survey on my Instagram, and people still think like something like 20% of people voted. So there were like 3,000-4,000 people who voted. Out of that, 20% thought that Bitcoin is backed by gold. Or sorry, not Bitcoin. Out of that, 20% people thought
Dollar.
that the US dollar is backed by gold.
Yes, it's
Right?
incredible.
So we're still so far behind.
Yes.
The way that I see it, even at $1 million, most people are going to have no allocation because it doesn't take a lot for it to go to $1 million, right? Like think about it this way: Michael Saylor is buying a few thousand Bitcoin every single week. He
Yeah.
slowed down a little bit because the stock price went down. He hasn't been issuing as many shares, and that's perfectly fine. But there are other players who are going to do the same thing, and they're going to do it before retail investors figure it out. So the way that I see it, even at $1 million, most people will have no allocation. Because what's going to happen is the price is going to keep in mind from 100k to 1 million is only 10x. It doesn't take the entire world's population to bring Bitcoin's price up
No.
10x, right? The people who own Bitcoin right now want as much as possible. Both of you are probably still buying Bitcoin. I'm still buying Bitcoin, even though I have some. I'm still buying Bitcoin. But the thing is that we don't need new people to come into Bitcoin's market for the price to go up. So
to 1 million, maybe some new, yes. Not
no,
that many, not the whole population.
I don't think so. I think even with the current people that are buying Bitcoin, it can still go to $1 million, right? Because the people who own it aren't willing to sell.
Yeah, yes. But depending on the time frame then.
Oh, yeah. If we have a long enough time horizon, it's going to go to $1 million regardless. It
Sure,
can go to $1 million with the exact same people who are there right now. Right.
Totally
And in that time, if it does, let's say the power law works. Let's say people think that, power law is working. 10 years from now, Bitcoin's going to go to $1 million. In that 10 years, you don't need new people to buy Bitcoin.
Yes, I agree.
Right? The people who buy Bitcoin now, if they just keep buying what they're buying right now, we're taking supply out of the market. We're increasing the floor price. I had a conversation with I'm not sure if you guys know him, Chris Johnson from Wealth Squad. We were talking about how Bitcoiners set the floor price for Bitcoin. The more convicted Bitcoiners there are, the higher they set the floor price. There are people who own Bitcoin today who have no idea what it is. When they figure it out, don't you think they're going to want more?
Yes.
Right? So only 1% of the world has an allocation today. If that 1% of people just keep learning more and they keep figuring it out, the price is going to $1 million regardless. It doesn't matter if new people figure it out. Like, let's say your family and friends, my family and friends, they don't need to figure it out for Bitcoin to go to $1 million. It's going there regardless. And that's what people can't wrap their heads around. They think that Bitcoiners need exit liquidity, but they don't. Bitcoiners don't need exit liquidity. There's always going to be exit liquidity. There's always going to be people who want Bitcoin. Like, I don't need to introduce Bitcoin to a new person. I know one of you guys would buy my Bitcoin, right? Like, if I had to sell Bitcoin, I know one of you guys are going to have an order at some point to buy some. If I need to pay for my lifestyle, then I'll do it, right? But in the short term, in the medium term, I'm not selling anything.
Interesting.
And that's what makes it. That's what makes a snowball grow. It's compounding over time. The people who want, like even Michael Saylor, his first buy was for $250 million, and Bitcoin was so much cheaper then. Today he's buying Bitcoin. He's buying $5 billion worth of Bitcoin. Now he's buying $100 million worth of Bitcoin, and it feels like, oh, he's not buying that much.
Yes.
Right?
We have all this feeling, just 100 million. What is 100 million?
Exactly. So the same people that exist today that understand Bitcoin can run Bitcoin's price up to $1 million on their own.
Yes, and also there is no limit how many shares Michael Saylor can issue. So
exactly.
there is
That's it, right? And over time, if he does turn it into a Bitcoin bank, if he turns it into something massive, they're going to own more and more Bitcoin. That's their capital. That's how they build their business. That's if they can continue to just accumulate as much capital as possible, they're going to be in such a position so far ahead of the competition that nobody can compete. and those people are still going to have to buy Bitcoin.
Yeah. To me, that one is a bit concerning because I mean that Bitcoin is at the right disposal of the government in the micro sale or neo sale, so I don't like that much. But I like to think about it is the result, as you said, of the floor price versus the halvings. So these two things make the Bitcoin price to increase. So the floor price of the hodlers versus the halvings and the increased scarcity. This thing is enough. Then of course it will be microserver, there will be the institution, the shares, and but the great insights really. I really like the fact that we don't need XC liquidity for Bitcoin because the system of scarcity makes the trick on its own.
Yeah,
And yeah,
that's
yeah,
it. That's
that's
it.
it.
It's scarce. You don't need more people to buy Bitcoin when the people who already own Bitcoin are still buying more.
It will having new people, let's say, it will accelerate the
Yeah,
path.
it'll accelerate. Yeah,
Yes.
because the people who want it now are going to continue buying, and then as more people get added on, the network becomes more valuable. There are more connections. There are more services and products that are willing to be offered in exchange for Bitcoin. So every single person, let's say for example, when you guys started creating content about Bitcoin, you're willing to offer your services for Bitcoin. And what that means is that more and more products are being added to the catalog of things that can be bought for Bitcoin, right? You're
So
adding your services. Then there's other people who are doing it. I'm doing it. There are tons of people. And over time, it'll keep increasing. Eventually, we're going to see people who are willing to sell their houses directly in exchange for Bitcoin. So what that does is it just increases the network. It just makes it bigger and bigger and bigger. And it'll accelerate. I personally, I don't know if the power law is going to work. I think I think that there's a very strong likelihood that we see price movements that are completely unexpected just because of the fact that this is an inelastic asset and nothing else has
agree.
been an inelastic asset before this. So
I agree on power law, but we have to recognize that it was forecasting 93 at the end of the year and
yeah,
93K, and you reached 93K when Bitcoin was at 40, 50K. So 2024 was, I think 2025 we will end much higher than 125, 130. But so far, 2024 was quite accurate.
yeah, it
But
was.
also,
Actually, yeah, he said that 1 million will be by, if I'm not wrong, 2032. 2032 will be 1
2032.
million.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
So if that does happen, the way that I'm thinking is that we don't need new people to enter the market. The people who are buying Bitcoin today are going to keep adding value. They're going to keep creating value. And they're going to keep accumulating, right?
One last question from my side. Now, going towards 2025, how do you see this the narrative of this year strategic Bitcoin reserve playing out? What do you think will happen? I know that it's all mostly estimation or speculation. There are many we see from X that there are not only the U.S. federal government but also many U.S. states plus other countries are discussing about this.
Yeah, the way that I see it, if the US doesn't do it, then somebody else is going to.
Yeah.
That's it. If the US doesn't do it, then somebody else will. If the US doesn't do it early enough and they want a million Bitcoin, at some point they're not going to be able to get a million Bitcoin because nobody's going to want dollars for Bitcoin unless they give away, let's say, unless they start charging people taxes in terms of Bitcoin. Maybe then they can accumulate it. Um, there's going to be a point though where they're not going to be able to get a million Bitcoin because the people who own it are not willing to sell it. They're not willing to give it away.
Not at 1 million, or not at the
Yeah,
price that they want, like not at the price that
exactly.
allows them to buy for 1 million.
Even in general, they may not be able to get to a million Bitcoin. If people aren't willing to sell, then how are they going to get to a million Bitcoin? And
And
then
the price
let's
should
say,
go up, and
yeah,
then the price goes up. Maybe it will not.
price
Yeah.
will keep
yeah,
going. It'll keep going up. Yeah. It'll keep going up. But let's think of it this way. Let's say if the U.S. government says they want a million Bitcoin, then Russia says they want a million Bitcoin, then China says, then India says, then Brazil says. How many of those countries are actually going to be able to get to a million Bitcoin until there's literally no more supply available? At some point, Bitcoiners will have such abundant lives that they're not going to need to give away their Bitcoin. They're going to be able to keep it forever, right?
yeah.
Because Bitcoin is worth so much at that point. Like they're not going to, there's nothing that you can, if somebody truly understands how Bitcoin works and they have everything everything that's in their life they need, everything they want, everything they need, it's all fulfilled. You can't give them anything to take their Bitcoin away from them,
Exactly.
right? And
Yes.
the
It's
US,
also true that if you reach one level, then maybe people want always more, and so maybe
Yeah.
people will want more, but less in proportion, let's say. Yeah, I agree. Also, because at the end there are 21 million, and probably 4 or 5 million are gone forever. So people say there will be 14, 15 million Bitcoin. So,
but there are 2.2 million on exchanges globally. 2.2. How can they get to 1 million if 2.2
each
are on
branch, yes.
exchange?
And a lot
It's
of them aren't.
impossible.
They're not even on sale. The ones that are on exchanges, people are just
Yes,
using their
many are
exchanges as
holding.
wallets.
Yes,
Yeah.
true.
Yeah, I see.
Yeah.
It was amazing. Also, this insight. Trump made big promises, also political promises, but also Bitcoin freeing Ross. We see. It's due. It's time. It's
In
almost there.
less than 2 weeks now. It's almost imminent, in less than 2 weeks. So
Yeah.
it's happening.
Okay.
I mean, let's see when it happens. It may not happen in the first
Yeah,
month.
days.
May not
Or
happen in
first,
the first year. Who knows? But eventually it will.
I think the first 100 days are really important. So maybe not the buying itself, but the signal. So for my perspective, at least now what is priced in is that the 200K will be a stockpile. The one that US already have, that will be a stockpile. And maybe if there is not this even this announcement, maybe the Bitcoin price will feel this and maybe go down. Different in saying we will buy. I'm not expecting they will buy in the first 3 months, but already the intention to buy, this will be what is the big catalyst.
Yeah.
Then when they buy is another thing, but the message that the US will start buying Bitcoin as they buying gold, they have gold in a strategic asset. If it happens, for me, it's likely that happens in the first 100 days, the announcement.
The way that I see it, I think whoever does do it, whoever does actually create the strategic Bitcoin reserve for the US, they're going to have a legacy and nobody's going to forget them ever, because whatever
Yeah.
Bitcoin they accumulate, because the price is going to go up so much, they're basically going to be supporting their country's currency. They're going to be supporting their country's bond market. Maybe the bond market just completely explodes because of the US government buying Bitcoin and people no longer want bonds. Maybe the bond market falls apart. And it's just, it shows you that whoever sets up the strategic Bitcoin reserve had the foresight to predict that this is where the world is going. Even if they didn't, it seems like they do, because they set up the strategic Bitcoin reserve. So I don't think that Trump is going to let that go, but who knows? I guess the only thing we can do is let time tell.
Yes, interesting times ahead.
Very interesting. Yep.
We have probably reached 1 hour. What do you think, Alessandro? Yeah.
Yes, I think it's thanks Rajat. Thanks Rajat for all insights. It was a great conversation. You're also top educator in X. I follow you, your posts, and you have already 360-degree from comparison with the real estate. How are these comparing to people to understand Bitcoin, and also very long message explaining in simple terms why people should invest in Bitcoin. So it was great to have this conversation, that to have you as a guest in our podcast.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me. This was really fun.
Great insights. Thank you, Rajat. Thank you to all our listeners. Don't forget to recommend our podcast, share it with your friends and family. Have a nice start of the year, and see you very soon in the next episode. Thank
Next
you.
one is in 2 weeks. Bye.
Bye. Bye, all.
Amazing.